This is great. What is this? ABBA?
Hello and welcome to the EuroWhat, episode 239, dropping on August 13th, 2024. We are a pair of Americans trying to make sense of the Eurovision Song Contest. I'm Mike McComb, and I will soon be joined by my co-host, Ben Smith. In this episode, we'll be opening up our Patreon vault to talk about ABBA Gold. So as Sweden gets ready to fully hand over Eurovision responsibilities to Switzerland, we thought this would be a good time to revisit our conversation about Elisabeth Vincentelli's entry in the 33 1/3 series, ABBA Gold. We had this conversation as a bonus episode over on our Patreon last summer, so you may hear some references to predictions of what 2024 might have in store. You'll also hear a reference to another book in the series, Carl Wilson's examination of Celine Dion's Let's Talk About Love. If you join our Patreon, you can take part in a live book club discussion about that book on Saturday, August 31st. For more info, check out patreon.com/EuroWhat or click the link in the show notes. It should be a fun way to wrap up our Summer of Celine. But for now, let's dig for some ABBA Gold. This is like the only time that I actually read books. It's kind of shameful.
Happy to help with your reading goal.
Thank you. Yes. This was a good read. This was a fun subject to tackle. It was also my first exposure to the 33 1/3 series, so eager to check out more.
I like them because they are on the shortish side. They're all from Bloomsbury Publishing. They've now expanded it. There's now a whole 33 1/3 covering Asian music. They now have a specific imprint for European. There was somebody that I saw at one of the sessions at PopCon who has a book about the Ukrainian band Veve's like demo tape Tansi that I've been reading. Each edition of the series features an author talking about one album, kind of in whatever format they see fit. John Darnielle, who is the main creative force behind the band The Mountain Goats, wrote a 33 1/3 about the Black Sabbath album Master of Reality that is essentially a work of fiction. Is written from the perspective of a troubled teen in a mental ward who has had his Master of Reality tape taken away upon check-in.
Huh.
I have looked at the process of what applying to write one of these looks like, and I think if you make a compelling case for I would like to cover this album, I plan to cover it this way, they will give you the leeway to do that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so the one that we were talking about today is unusual for the series because generally when you are talking about great albums, you're not often talking about a compilation album, which is what ABBA Gold is. This one really goes like album by album with what's included on ABBA Gold. This is the 7th entry in the series. It was published in 2004 and is about the initial 1992 release of ABBA Gold. Why we're talking about it on our show is, well, next year is the 50th anniversary of ABBA winning Eurovision. They're going to do so much with that. And like, I'm intrigued. But like, it just felt like we needed to start stretching for that somehow. And my initial thought had been to watch ABBA the movie, but that is very hard to do.
I think it was Turner Classic Movies. This must have been a year or two ago. Their Saturday night obscure movie feature series. We have the Hulu DVR package thing, and I had it recorded, never got around to watching it. It's like, oh yeah, it'll just be there whenever I want to go back to it. But then Hulu changed it where like after 9 months, it'll delete whatever is on the DVR. So like I went to go check it when we were just like, oh yeah, we should totally do ABBA the movie. And it was like, oh no, it's gone. So is everything else. Doggone it.
Yeah, and like I was just like, well, certainly somewhere has it. Does my library system have like a DVD copy? No. Is it weirdly available on Tubi for some reason? I will watch it with a commercial cutting in every 15 minutes if I have to. No. I can buy a copy off of eBay, but I was not willing to do that for this. I do not need to see that movie that badly. Is the prospect of like a mockumentary about ABBA from 77 in Australia very intriguing me? Yes, but apparently my pocketbook does have some limits.
Yeah. The thing is, I know I've seen this movie. I have zero recollection about any of it. As we were getting ready for today's discussion, I was thinking, like, what was my relationship with ABBA? Like, they weren't an entry point to Eurovision for me or anything like that. I know I listened to ABBA Gold in high school. I worked at the public library in my hometown and worked at the circulation desk. So things would come in and we'd be like, oh, cool, the CD looks interesting. So check that out. And ABBA Gold was one of them. I remember listening to the album, ripping some of the tracks for like mix CDs, that sort of thing, just to place this in time.
Yes.
I don't remember having any, oh man, this is amazing sort of reaction to it. It's like, oh yeah, some of these songs are good. Some of these are really catchy. And pretty sure my library had the DVD for the ABBA movie. So like that was when I would have seen it. But ABBA was always just kind of like a punchline in the 90s. Like I remember there were like Simpsons jokes about them and stuff, but yeah, nothing that really stuck prominently until I saw Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, which gets mentioned in the book. Australia's relationship with ABBA is quite strong.
Much like Eurovision, like there's some sort of kitsch factor maybe at play.
I saw Priscilla, Queen of the Desert at a midnight screening my sophomore year of college. And I love that movie. It's such a good time. Got the soundtrack immediately after seeing it. And like one of the songs that's kind of a plot point of the movie is Mamma Mia. And it's really used well in the movie. I think that's when my genuine appreciation for ABBA and their place in the pop music firmament was established in my mind.
Part of the reason I'm like, we should do something ABBA related over on our Patreon is because I have been working on our Welcome to Sweden episode that's coming at the start of September. And like, we have to talk about ABBA at some point there.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of stuff to dive into with them as a group and with Eurovision. ABBA is one of those bands that has just sort of always been there. They're an ambient presence in pop music, especially like 90s, 2000s. There was a pop project called the A-Teens where it was just like, here are young Swedish singers covering all of the ABBA songs. Who is the market for this? Because at the time, I was not the market for it. I'm like, why is this a thing? Why are we doing this? I probably picked up a copy of ABBA Gold in college, not from the library, from like whatever sort of file sharing network was happening on campus. So I definitely acquired this album by legal means.
Yes.
As you hit different pieces of their discography, different songs would hit me at different times, but like it's definitely been on playlists since I really started paying attention to music in college.
I think for me, and this kind of ties in with when ABBA Gold came out in 92 and then the Australian movies like Muriel's Wedding and Priscilla. This was also around the time that Ace of Base came out. And
yes,
they were often described as like 90s ABBA, which we could probably, well, we don't have to get into that here, but like,
yeah, that's
like, okay, it's two men and two women. End of comparison. Oh, and they're all Swedish. Like that was kind of where the
let's say end of list. Like yeah. I get like yes, they have like the same general shape, but they're very different.
Right.
But yeah, like I think what I got the most out of this book is that it talks about the weird 90s confluence point of just all of these sort of ABBA related things happening in the early 90s that leads up to the ABBA Gold coming out. So like you have the ABBA cover band Bjorn Again opening for Nirvana at the 1992 Reading Festival at the band's request. You have Erasure releasing the ABBA-esque EP and going to like number one in the UK and having some level of US success with that. You have the Justified Ancients of Moo, so the KLF. You do not need to listen to more than like 10 seconds of what I link to, doing their sort of like egregious sampling that they do in their work with Dancing Queen on The Queen and I. Within a couple years, although I don't think they're related at all, both Muriel's Wedding and Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, reinvigorating interest in the band sort of roughly a decade after they had called it quits.
Right.
It's always fun just seeing sort of all of the dots connecting. And like, ultimately, it probably just is a record company going, oh, hey, we have the rights to distribute ABBA globally. Instead of it being among a bunch of different record companies, let's put together a greatest hits album.
Yeah, and this was also the time of like the BMG pay 1 penny for a CD. I was going to say scam. It was partially a scam, but yeah, I mean, like that's where like you got the Grease soundtrack, the Phantom of the Opera cast recording, like all of these catalog albums. And I think ABBA Gold was probably one of the ones that was featured in that. So it's a very easy way to access those albums. Am I making a reference to something that is before your time?
No, I know exactly what you were talking about. No, I was right at the tail end of when that scam ended, so I never got to take part. ABBA on some level feels very ubiquitous to me, and I just think of things like Fleetwood Mac's Rumors of just albums that they basically give you when you buy a record player.
ABBA broke up like right before I was born, but I didn't get that sense of the omnipresence. And I think this is where our slight age gap like really comes into play, where the timing of it wasn't quite right for me. That was one of the things that I was really surprised by in the book was, number one, just how prolific their career was in such a short amount of time. Like, they released a lot of albums in that 7-year period. But then also the fact that they were really kind of pioneers in music video. Vincentelli, she kept on making these references to all of their music videos. And it's like, oh, this is like 1977, 1978. This is well before MTV, and there wasn't a centralized music video location. And they were putting out a lot of music video products. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And just sort of this like proto MTV leading the charge on that. I was like, oh, and she doesn't really go into that part of their influence just because they were so influential in other ways.
They were widely popular, and I get the impression that they weren't like a huge touring band, both just because of the volume of output and also just like, if you listen to the lyrics of Super Trooper, they're just tired.
I got the sense that like the Australia tour, which is the center of the ABBA movie, was probably like the big tour.
Yeah.
I don't know how they would have been able to fit touring in along with all of the other stuff that they were doing. And like having
and, like,
families, like they were married couples. They did have kids. So
music videos are a very canny way to be like, hello, we can't be in Australia because it's very far away, but here is a video of us. And like, that's how Mamma Mia becomes a hit, is because they make a video over there. Also, side note, I love that she just drops it. Oh yeah, the guy who made a bunch of ABBA's music videos is the person who made the Cider House Rules and Chocolat and just other things like that.
Oh yeah. That's pretty common. Like David Fincher.
Oh yeah, it's just the person who made all of kind of these very cheaply made ABBA music videos later goes on to be a major filmmaker. One thing that I think I appreciate about their music is, and we've talked about it on the show before in terms of Italian music is very matchy, but like ABBA's music is really good at being happy music, super sad lyrics, like that one meme of the two houses in California.
Oh, yes.
just like the big black house next to like the very pastel house that like I was very tempted to do an Oppenheimer Barbie reference with, because of course.
I think someone may have beat you to the punch on that one. So
both of those are the exact same ABBA song at the same time. I really love the song The Winner Takes It All. When we were in Eurovision covers season with the home concerts this year, I was delighted to see that Victor Vernicos picked The Winner Takes It All if he was going to cover an ABBA song, because that one is just so good at just sort of breaking your heart.
I think for me, and really, I think this was kind of the genesis of when we were starting to think about like how we should talk about ABBA. On my Spotify main playlist, I have Cher's cover of Gimme, Gimme, Gimme. I think it's fantastic. Like, I think her entire ABBA cover album is genuinely good. I really feel like Cher and Eurovision should be more in conversation with one another. But then it was like, oh, wait, yeah, the reason she did that was because she was in Mamma Mia too. It's like, oh, yeah, we should probably talk about that. Oh, we should talk about ABBA. Just kind of like,
what if we talked about ABBA? Because like, that's kind of... It is like the go-to trivia question about the Eurovision Song Contest in the United States is just like, is ABBA, from Eurovision.
I think it was also interesting in the book, given when it was published, because it came out in about 2004. So like kind of placing that in time with how people were also thinking of Eurovision at that time. But it was really bringing to the fore the sort of poptimism, rockism debate we've talked about on the show previously. And I think you could tell if somebody's a poptimist or rockist just by asking them, so what do you think of ABBA? Because that seems to be like the dividing line, at least in music criticism at that time.
The way that this book talks about Eurovision, like it's kind of trying to avoid it, although at the end you have to talk about Waterloo because it closes ABBA Gold and it feels like a good closing point. But it feel like another one of the 33 1/3 series I've really enjoyed, particularly in its expanded edition, is Carl Wilson's Let's Talk About Love, where he is talking about an album that he does not like, Celine Dion's Let's Talk About Love. And what does this album say about taste and some of those same like poptimist, rockist thoughts? What does the type of music Celine Dion makes say about us? But that is another case that is like go to Eurovision trivia question number 2, Celine Dion. The way that he talks about the contest, because he wrote that book in 2007, the way that Vincentelli talks about the contest in 2004 feels very much of its time and in line with where the contest kind of was, and was sort of starting to change itself from being kind of the staid 90s thing into a little bit closer to what we see now. It's interesting to see what criticism at the time of the contest looks like and how I feel about it as someone who knows too much about it at this point.
Yeah. We will end up doing a Terry Wogan episode at some point. So
yeah. Oh,
sorry.
Oh, we're going to be so mean to that man, and he deserves it.
Yeah.
Knowing that this came out in 2004, it's very interesting to see what's happened with ABBA since then. I talked about Justified Ancients of Moo, like really just writing a song on top of Dancing Queen and getting frowny faces from ABBA's publishers, and rightly so. It's the KLF.
Yeah.
Since 2004, you also have Madonna writing a song on top of Gimme, 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 and having full blessing of the band, and it doing great. Hung Up is very good.
Yeah, I think it is one of her all-time best tracks.
The book is aware of the Mamma Mia musical. It does not know that there's going to be both a movie and a sequel that will tap even further into the ABBA back catalog, because we're making a sequel to Mamma Mia.
And I think there's a third movie, at least in development. I don't...
What?
Yeah.
How?
Well, the first two were printing money, so I think a third one was inevitable.
I mean, I understand that portion of things, but like, one thing that they talk about in this book is that the band said when they were compiling a box set is that, yeah, we wrote like 12 songs a year. It's not like there's like a deep reserve of scraps that you normally see in like a box set of like, oh, yeah, like here's a previous version of this, or here's a song that we didn't release because we didn't think it was good enough. ABBA does not have the Prince level vault of weird stuff. They just have, these are the albums we made over these 7 years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they've got the new album that came out a couple years ago. So, like, what if Mamma Mia in space?
I mean, I would go see that, because that sounds like a terrible idea.
Oh, I have plenty of those. So.
Yes. What they're doing with Voyage is super intriguing to me. Had the week that Eurovision was happening in the UK not also been the coronation, I was very tempted to try and go swing through London to try and go see that, but not at coronation prices.
All the more reason to go back.
Eurovision-wise, Sweden has won. We're definitely going to be talking about that very soon. I don't know, like I'm putting together my notes for that, and it's very interesting because like ABBA is definitely part of Sweden's story, but there's so much more going on there.
Yeah, that was actually one of the observations very early on in the book that did not occur to me until it was like I actually read it, where the winners of the 75 and 76 contest would be what we would probably call today ABBA clones, the way that we call other tracks like Fuego clones, following up on previous year's success. And it's just like, oh, like 75 Ding a Dong and 76 Save Your Kisses for Me. It's like, oh, yeah. Those are very ABBA-like in their structure, but they are also bangers. Like, Ding a Dong is one of my favorite Eurovision songs of all time. If this show existed in 1975, would I be so gung-ho about that song? It's like, oh, this just sounds like last year's winners, everybody. Come on. Context is everything.
One thing that I've taken away from this book is that how much of my mental perception of ABBA is just the tracks on Gold. The book mentions multiple times that Summer Night City was a hit for ABBA and does not appear on Gold, to the point where I'm just like, okay, does Elisabeth Vincentelli just like really like this song? I haven't actually heard it, and this was a song that was popular for ABBA, so like I went and sought that one out, and now I'm just like, I should maybe go through their album tracks. She also talks about like the weird stuff on their albums, like when they would do instrumentals. The Canadian band always has used ABBA's Arrival as walk-on music for like the last couple concerts I've seen of theirs, so they clearly have an affinity for it. And like, it's just this very cool instrumental track that I absolutely was like Shazamming at one of their shows thinking, this is great, what is this? ABBA?
As I said previously, I did not realize how many albums they released when I was in high school and like buying music, back when you bought it in album form. Cadence is usually like an album maybe every 2 years, usually every 3 years, something like that. But no, they were just banging them out like as soon as they were ready to go. And it's like, oh, wow. Like, because the book is divided up, like each chapter is covering each album. And it's like, oh, wow, this book has a lot more chapters than I was expecting.
Well, and it kind of dips into this in the intro about just like how the music industry has changed from being a very singles forward model to being, well, I mean, it is now getting very singles driven again, but in a different way where you'll have 13 different songwriters on a track and an album will be recorded at like 6 different studios. Cause like it's comparing ABBA just being like, yeah, they worked with generally the same producer in these 3 studios in Sweden, and then just drops Shania Twain's up as, yeah, like this album was mixed 3 different ways and was worked on by all these different people in all these different studios. Which, I mean, that's Muttlange. That's a whole other thing.
This 33 1/3 is a great time capsule of what the early aughts music industry was like, looking back at the early 90s music industry. And we are looking at it 20 years onward. And there's a lot of history in this one text that I don't think was intended at the time that it was written, but it's sparking a lot of ideas, which I think is the point of good writing.
I read this and then I've done like a couple quick skimmy rereads prepping for this episode. And it didn't hit me until today that the author spends a lot of time talking about the cover of the 1975 Greatest Hits ABBA album and just particularly calling out its heinousness. So I finally looked it up and it's bad. And like, I've seen lots of bad album art, but it is just a terrible van painting of the band by someone who also enjoyed Hieronymus Bosch.
Okay, I'm going to click on the link now and take a look. Oh no. Okay, yeah, this will be in the show notes.
Yeah, no, it needs to go in the show notes. It's just I want to know the process behind, or the lack of process, honestly, behind how did this happen?
Wow. Wow. Okay. Not to spoil anything, because I really think everybody should be looking at this. Napoleon is popping out of the piano, but in kind of a creepy Jack in the Box sort of a way. So, get excited when you click on this link, everybody.
And then because this is an eBay link, this means I'm going to get like 3 emails over the next 4 weeks being, hey, you looked at this thing. Do you want to purchase it? And I don't. But yeah, no, there is just some rich details going on that, again, we will put this in the show notes.
And the fact that it was for a greatest hits album in 1975, like ABBA Gold was their greatest hits after that. A prolific career. Absolutely amazing.
Let's bring this month's meeting of the EuroWhat AV Club to a close. Thanks for listening and supporting the EuroWhat podcast. Both shows are hosted by Ben Smith, that's me, and Mike McComb.
That's me. The live book club for Carl Wilson's Let's Talk About Love, A Journey to the End of Bad Taste, will be happening August 31st. For more information on how you can join us, check out patreon.com/EuroWhat. Next time on the main feed, Ben offers his analysis on how to win Melfest.